College was turning me into someone I barely recognized, but in the best possible way. I'd started keeping a little notebook in my bag. Just a cheap spiral-bound journal, the kind you'd overlook in a dollar store. But inside it were fragments of me, thoughts I was too afraid to say out loud, tiny victories I didn't want to forget, and the names of people who made me feel seen. Jess, Maya, Rio, Lee, and now, Professor Martin. Names are important, Professor Martin had said in our last public speaking class. Say yours with the kind of confidence that dares someone to forget it. I wrote that quote in my notebook. Underlined it twice. Skylar Ray Morgan. That was my name now, one I chose, one I claimed, one I'd bleed for if I had to. Lee and I went for coffee that Saturday. It wasn't a date, not officially, but we both dressed like it might be. I wore my cropped denim jacket, the one Jess had given me before I left home. Lee wore a dark beanie that made their green eyes stand out even more. We sipped iced lattes on the lawn behind the Humanities building, watching clouds drift across a pale blue sky. I used to wish I was invisible, Lee said quietly. Back in high school, I thought if no one saw me, no one could hate me. I nodded. I used to wish the opposite. That I could shine so bright no one would notice what I was hiding. They looked at me, really looked. But you're not hiding anymore. Not anymore, I said, soft but sure. By mid-October, I'd started volunteering at the campus LGBTQ+ center. It was just a few hours a week, answering phones, greeting visitors, sorting flyers, but every second felt like I was giving back a little piece of what I'd been given. One rainy Wednesday, a freshman came in, shaky hands, soaked hoodie, voice barely above a whisper. Is this where trans people go? I smiled. It's where everyone goes. But yes, you're safe here. They nodded, eyes glassy. I handed them a cup of tea. And later that night, I added another name to my notebook. Avery, brave as hell. Then came the email. The subject line, guest speaker invitation, LGBTQ+ youth conference. My stomach flipped. It was from a coordinator I'd met through Professor Martin. They wanted me to speak, me, Skylar, at a statewide event next month. Topic, owning your voice after coming out. I read the email 3 times before calling Jess. You have to do it, she said immediately. This is exactly what you're meant for. But what if I mess it up? What if I freeze? You won't, she said. Because it's your story. And no one tells it better than you. Maya and Rio helped me rehearse the speech. We'd sneak into the empty theater at night, take turns pacing the stage, our voices echoing against velvet curtains. You've got presence, Sky, Rio said, sitting cross-legged on the stage floor. Like Toni Morrison meets Zendaya-level presence. I laughed. High praise. They shrugged. You've got something people need to hear. Don't hold back. The day of the conference, I wore a tailored blazer, mascara that didn't clump, and the silver pendant Jess had mailed me the week before. It read, "Say it proud." I stepped up to the microphone, heart pounding, and scanned the crowd. High school students, teachers, parents, a few familiar faces from campus. Then I began. I used to think the girl in the mirror wasn't me, that she was a mistake, a fantasy, a threat. I paused, breath shallow. But now, she's not just real, she's mine. The room held its breath. And then, applause. Not polite, not hesitant, but thunderous. Later, as I walked off stage, someone ran up and hugged me. It was a teenager with tears in their eyes. I didn't know I could feel this way, they whispered. You gave me hope. I smiled, my own throat tight. That's what someone once did for me. That night, I added one more name to my notebook. Me, for finally becoming. If the speech at the youth conference was the climax of my semester, the days that followed were the quiet denouement. But quiet doesn't mean empty. After that night, something shifted. My name, Skylar Ray Morgan, started showing up in emails, on flyers, and in whispers in the hallways of the campus LGBTQ+ center. People I'd never met greeted me like we'd known each other for years. You're the girl who spoke at the youth event, right? I saw your video, my cousin cried. Are you doing more talks? It was surreal. For so long, I'd been a whisper in my own life. Now I was a voice. One Monday morning, I walked into the LGBTQ+ center to find a large manila envelope waiting for me in my cubby. It was from the Stonehouse Foundation, a nonprofit known for funding small community-based projects led by queer youth. Inside was a letter. We saw your conference speech and were deeply moved. If you're interested, we'd love to offer you a micro-grant to design a project centered on trans youth empowerment. My hands trembled. They were offering me money not for being trans, but for doing something with it. For leading. The project I dreamed up came from a conversation I'd had with Lee weeks earlier. What if we had a space, I had said, not just a room, but a literal space where you could walk in and feel like you belonged. Like you weren't just welcome, you were expected. That idea became the Mirror Room, a pop-up installation hosted on campus with 3 parts. One side filled with mirrors framed with affirming messages handwritten by students. A voice booth where anyone could record or listen to messages from queer and trans youth across the state. A small wall of photos, before and after shots, chosen not for aesthetics, but for meaning. Captions like "This is me before I found my voice. This is me now." I pitched it. They approved it. And suddenly, I was no longer just a student. I was a creator. I looped in Maya and Rio immediately. Maya handled the visual layout. Rio took charge of audio logistics, and I worked on the storytelling pieces. We turned the project into a collaborative heartbeat. Lee helped build the frames. You've got a way of making broken things shine, I told them, watching them sand wood late one evening. They looked up, blushing slightly. Takes one to know one. Jess visited the weekend before the Mirror Room opened. I hadn't seen her in person in months, and when she stepped off the bus wearing her signature oversized denim coat and a proud grin, I practically ran into her arms. You've changed, she said, pulling back and brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. But it's still you. It's more you. That night, we lay side by side in my tiny dorm bed, talking until nearly sunrise. She told me about community college, about her crush on a girl named Sienna, about how she wore the necklace I gave her on days that feel too heavy. And I told her everything, even the things I'd only written in my notebook. I don't know where this ends, Jess, I whispered. I just know it finally feels like my story. She smiled, eyes wet. Then keep writing it. Opening day of the Mirror Room was chaos and catharsis all at once. Students came in waves, some curious, some cautious, some clearly overwhelmed by how personal everything felt. The voice booth quickly filled with recordings. One girl cried at the photo wall. I've never seen people like me before and after. A faculty member hugged me quietly. You've created something sacred, Skylar. But it was what happened after the room closed for the day that stayed with me most. Lee and I stayed behind to clean up. As we stood in front of one of the mirrors, reading the notes people had taped up, I caught our reflection side by side. You look proud, Lee said. I am proud. There was a pause. I know this might mess everything up, they said, eyes flicking to mine, but can I kiss you? I froze, then nodded. Soft, hesitant. Like 2 people who weren't quite sure where they were going, but were willing to go together. Later that night, I wrote in my notebook. Sometimes the mirror doesn't lie. Sometimes it finally tells the truth. I don't know what I expected after the kiss with Lee. A declaration? A retreat? An awkward silence followed by days of avoidance? What I got instead was pancakes. The next morning, there was a knock on my dorm door, and when I opened it, there was Lee, holding 2 to-go boxes and a sheepish smile. Thought you might need fuel before your class, they said, lifting the lid to reveal blueberry pancakes with extra syrup, my favorite. We didn't talk about the kiss right away. We didn't need to. It was in the soft way they looked at me, the way their pinky brushed against mine while we ate on the floor, and the way they lingered a little too long when saying goodbye. It was unspoken, but it was safe. And safe was everything. The Mirror Room ran for 1 more week, but its impact stretched far beyond. I was invited to speak at 2 more campus events. One was a storytelling night called Truth in Transition, where students shared personal moments that defined their journeys. I told a story I hadn't told anyone, not even Jess. About a night in middle school when I'd stared into the bathroom mirror after a brutal day and whispered to myself, "You don't exist. You don't count." Then, years later, in that same mirror, dressed in my mom's old hoodie and my first pair of self-bought jeans, I'd whispered, "You're real. You made it." The room was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then someone in the back stood up and started clapping. The rest followed. That applause didn't feel like praise. It felt like permission to keep telling my story. The second event was more unexpected. A professor from the sociology department approached me after the mirror room closed. "I'm teaching a seminar next semester," she said, "on gender, narrative, and personal mythmaking. I want you to co-lead a few sessions." Me? "I'm just a freshman." She smiled. "Yes, but you're also a storyteller, and your story has power." Meanwhile, things with Lee deepened, but not in a rom-com kind of way. We didn't define anything. We didn't go Facebook official. What we did do was share space, comfortably, organically. Study sessions turned into movie nights. Movie nights turned into tangled legs and quiet laughter. Kisses came and went like punctuation, soft exclamations at the end of long days. Once, after a long walk around campus, Lee stopped beneath an old sycamore and turned to me. "I've never felt the scene," they said. "Not like this. Like someone sees all my pieces and still wants to put the puzzle together." I didn't answer. I just took their hand and held it tight. Because I felt it too. But not everything was soft edges and safe spaces. One afternoon, I received a message request from someone named Kyle B. The profile picture was generic. A car, no mutual friends. The message said, "You might have everyone else fooled, but I know what you really are. Freak." I stared at it for a long time. My hands shook. It felt like a ghost had slipped in through the digital cracks. But this time, I didn't delete it or pretend it didn't happen. I screenshotted it. I sent it to campus security. I blocked the account. And then I texted Maya and said, "Can we talk?" We sat under the same tree where we used to study freshman year. "You handled it," she said. "Better than most people would. I don't want to be scared again." "You don't have to be. You've got us." A few days later, I came home to find something on my dorm door. A sticky note with a hand-drawn mirror and the words, "You're more than they can break." No name. Just that. I knew it was one of my people. That mattered. At the end of the week, Lee and I went to a small queer open mic night off campus. I wasn't planning to perform. I just wanted to listen. But somehow, between a girl reciting slam poetry about her first binder and a guy singing a ballad he wrote for his boyfriend, I found myself at the mic. No plan. Just breath. And I told a new story. About a girl who used to think mirrors lied. About how, little by little, piece by piece, she'd gathered enough light to prove they were finally telling the truth. The room was silent when I finished. Then someone yelled, "That's our girl." I laughed. I cried. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. Finals week always had a strange sort of electricity, half caffeine, half chaos. Sleep schedules vanished, library seats were hoarded like gold, and everywhere you turned someone was crying into a textbook or chugging an energy drink. Me? I was oddly calm. Maybe it was because I'd already done the hardest thing I ever thought I'd have to do, look in the mirror and love what I saw. Organic chemistry couldn't compete with that. Still, I wasn't immune to the tension. My room looked like a post-apocalyptic stationery store. Highlighters everywhere, note cards stuck to the wall like wallpaper, my laptop blinking open tabs at war with one another. Jess and Maya popped in and out like whirlwind study elves, bringing snacks and moral support. Maya quizzed me on sociology theories while doing her nails. Jess curled up with her econ flashcards and threatened to drop out every 15 minutes. Lee, meanwhile, was my quiet anchor. We'd meet up at the late-night cafe, our laptops facing one another, the soft click of keyboards like our version of a love song. Sometimes we'd pass each other a post-it note instead of speaking tiny lifelines. One read, "You're smarter than your anxiety says you are." Another, "I'm proud of you. Always." But it wasn't all library dates and whispered encouragements. Something had shifted in me. It started small, a question I couldn't ignore. What if I didn't go home for the summer? The idea hit me one evening while walking past the campus quad. The fireflies were out, and the warm breeze reminded me of those Texas nights before everything changed. But instead of longing, I felt clarity. Back in Texas, I wasn't Skylar. Not fully. I was still someone's son, still someone's he, even if they were trying. Even if they meant well. Here, I could just be. So, I brought it up to Lee one night, after we'd finished our last final. "I'm thinking about staying," I said, stirring my hot chocolate. "Maybe applying for one of the summer programs here." Lee didn't answer right away. Then they smiled, slow and sure. "I was hoping you'd say that." Later that week, I found myself sitting in front of the Summer Fellows Program Director, Dr. Molina, a sharp-eyed historian with a soft voice. "I read your application," she said. "And your essay. Reflections Through Glass, Identity in Transition. You made me cry." I blinked. "Oh, wow. You're in," she said, sliding an acceptance letter across the table. "Welcome to the team. We're going to be studying personal narrative as resistance. I want your voice in the room." I walked out of that office in a daze. I didn't even make it 10 feet before I started crying. Packing up for the summer felt surreal. Most students were heading home, but I was staying, trading one dorm for another. Jess gave me a teary hug, swore she'd FaceTime every Sunday, and made me promise not to forget her. Maya slipped a journal into my bag, blank, leather-bound, with a note that said, "Fill this with everything you can't say out loud." As for my parents, I told them I'd been offered a research fellowship. That much was true. What I didn't say was that I needed the space, not just to work, but to breathe. To grow without apology. They said they were proud of me. And for the first time, I believed they meant it, even if they still said you with a little hesitation. My new room faced the campus garden. It was smaller, quieter. But it felt like a reset button. I set up my things. Photos of me and my friends. A postcard from the mirror room. My favorite poem taped to the wall. "You are not a mistake just because they never imagined you." Lee helped me move in. When we finished, we stood by the window and looked out at the late spring sky. "Summer sky," they said with a grin. Fitting. I laughed. "You just wanted to make a pun." Guilty. That night, as I lay in my new bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered a truth I hadn't dared say before. I'm not becoming anymore. I already am. And it wasn't about passing or makeup or soft clothes or even being seen. It was about feeling like myself and not apologizing for it. Tomorrow, the next chapter of my life would begin. But tonight, I slept as Skylar. And that was everything. Summer in the city was slower, quieter. Without the student buzz, the university transformed into a sleepy campus filled only with the hum of sprinklers, the buzz of cicadas, and the occasional clink of iced coffee glasses at the cafe. I liked it. There was room to breathe. Time to think. And in that stillness, something unexpected happened. I started hearing myself more clearly. Not the nervous voice that second-guessed every step I took or the loud one that needed constant validation. No, this was a softer voice. One that simply said, "You're here. You're enough." My research project was like nothing I'd ever done before. I was paired with a mentor named Dr. Ravi Patel, a published ethnographer with an aura of patience and curiosity. Our topic? Identity in transition. Narrative shifts, and lived experiences. At our first meeting, I brought a journal filled with ideas. "I want to study personal evolution," I said. Stories of people who became themselves, not just in gender, but in identity, culture, voice. He studied me for a moment before nodding. "Then start with your own." I froze. Mine? You've already written it, he said, tapping my application essay. But not for others. For yourself. Start from there. So I did. Each morning, I'd sit beneath the giant oak tree in the garden and write. Pages and pages poured out of me, some memories I hadn't touched in years. Some I didn't know I still carried. The time I wore Mom's dress in secret and stared at the mirror for hours. The time my best friend asked why I talked like a girl and laughed. The time I almost told my dad, then didn't. The time I did. And then, the time I said it out loud. I'm not a boy. I never was. Each time I wrote a memory, it felt like lifting a stone off my chest. Not all of it was easy. Some of it stung like it happened yesterday. But there was power in naming things. In honoring them. Lee visited often. Sometimes they'd just sit beside me as I wrote, quietly sipping coffee, sketching their own thoughts into a leather-bound sketchbook. Other times, they'd drag me out to the indie theater or an outdoor poetry night. We danced in the rain once, barefoot, soaked, laughing until our teeth chattered. It was simple, beautiful, healing. One night, lying under the stars on the campus lawn, Lee turned to me. Do you think you're happy now? I thought about it. About who I was a year ago, hidden in shadows. About the version of me that barely spoke above a whisper. About the girl I'd met in the mirror, trembling and unsure. I think I'm whole, I whispered. I think I'm learning to be happy. Lee reached for my hand and held it. Not tightly. Just enough. Midway through the summer, Dr. Patel invited me to co-present our research at a local conference. I panicked at first. Me? Present? In front of people? He smiled. Skylar, this is your story. Who better to tell it? We practiced. I wrote and rewrote my section of the talk, tightening it like a bowstring. The night before the presentation, I stood in my dorm room, fully dressed in a navy blouse, tan slacks, and my favorite wedge sandals. I stared at the mirror. Not nervously this time. Proudly. The next day, when I stood before that small crowd, dozens of academics, students, and strangers, I didn't just talk about data. I told them about the mirror. About the names I used to hide behind. About the quiet power of becoming. When I was done, there was silence. Then a single clap. Then more. The applause grew until it wrapped around me like a wave. And then I saw her. In the second row, an older woman, maybe in her 60s, eyes filled with tears. After the session, she approached me quietly. I just wanted to say, thank you. I have a grandson. Or maybe a granddaughter. We don't know yet. But I think I understand a little better now. I nodded, unable to speak. We hugged. That night, I wrote in my journal. Today I spoke my truth out loud. Not to defend. Not to justify. Just to share. And the world didn't end. It opened. Fall semester was still weeks away, but I no longer measured time in academic terms. Not entirely. Now, my days were stitched together by moments of becoming, by late-night talks with Lee, by the pages I filled in my journal, by texts from Amanda that began with, "Guess what, sis?" Even when nothing was happening, everything was changing. One morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual. Something had pulled me from sleep, though I couldn't name it. I padded barefoot to the mirror. Just me. No makeup. No carefully styled hair. Just Skylar, with puffy eyes and tangled curls, standing in her cotton sleep shirt. But when I smiled, she smiled back. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. That used to feel impossible. Later that day, I got a call from Amanda. She sounded breathless. Sky, you're not going to believe this, but you got a letter. Here. At Mom's. I furrowed my brow. A letter. It's from Dad. My heart stopped. We hadn't spoken since graduation. He hadn't responded to the card I left on his porch or the email I sent days later. I assumed silence was his final word. Amanda continued. It's handwritten. And long. Want me to read it? I hesitated. No. I want to read it myself. Amanda mailed it to me overnight. When the envelope arrived, I stared at it for hours before opening it. His handwriting hadn't changed. Slanted. Careful. Like he was trying not to mess up even when writing the simplest things. Skylar. I know I've been silent. I've been trying to find the words, but every version sounded like an excuse. The truth is, I panicked. I saw you walk across that stage, so proud, so certain, and I felt like I was watching a stranger. But here's what I didn't expect. That night, after I watched the footage Amanda sent me, I went into the attic. I found a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old pictures. Of you. And looking at them, I saw her. Not just in hindsight. I saw her. You weren't hiding. I just wasn't ready to see. That's on me. I'm sorry it took me this long. But if you still want a father, one who listens, who learns, who tries, I'm here. And if you don't, I understand. I just wanted you to know, I see you now. And I think your name is beautiful. Dad. I cried for hours. Not just for the apology, but for all the days I needed to hear that and didn't. Lee came over that evening. I showed them the letter. They didn't say anything at first. Just held me. Finally, they whispered, you deserved every word. And more. 2 weeks later, Dad called. Not to fix everything. Just to talk. It was awkward. A little stiff. But he asked questions. And he called me Skylar. That was enough for now. By mid-August, campus started stirring again. New students toured the halls. Familiar faces returned. My world grew louder, fuller, faster. But I wasn't falling behind. I was part of it. Leah and I joined a student group focused on LGBTQ+ support and advocacy. I applied to become a peer mentor for new students. I pitched a column to the school newspaper called Reflections, where students could anonymously share stories about identity, fear, and joy. And for the first time since coming out, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Then, one Friday, something unexpected happened. I was walking past the campus fountain when someone called out Skylar. I turned. It was Bree, my old childhood neighbor. One of the few friends I had before everything changed. Back when I was still pretending to be someone else. She blinked twice. Oh my God. It is you. I tensed, ready for awkwardness. But instead, she smiled wide. You look incredible, she said. I always knew there was something different about you, but this? You seem right. I laughed, caught off guard. Thanks. It's been a journey. She nodded. If you ever want to grab coffee and catch up, I'd love to hear the story. Maybe I would. Maybe not. But just hearing that someone remembered me and accepted the change, it stitched another little wound closed. That night, I lay in bed journaling by the window. I used to think the mirror held all my secrets. Now I see it's just showing me what was always there. A girl who was never broken. Just waiting. The first week of classes always carried a strange electricity, nervous laughter in crowded lecture halls, students running between buildings holding paper maps or frantically scrolling through schedules, professors pretending they didn't already hate half the class for not buying the textbook. And there I was, in the middle of it all, heart fluttering, mind sharp, heels clicking with purpose. My schedule this semester was intentionally heavier: gender studies, creative nonfiction writing, and even a seminar called Identity in Media and Myth. It was the kind of schedule that, a year ago, would have sent me into hiding. Now, I saw it as a declaration. This was the semester I would write my story, not just live it. But the biggest change wasn't academic. It was dorm life. Over the summer, I'd petitioned for housing with inclusive policies and won a spot in an LGBTQ+ designated floor in the newly renovated arts dorm. Roommate? None. Just me. My own sanctuary. The first night, I decorated my walls with string lights, printed quotes, Polaroids of Amanda and Lee, and right above my desk, a framed photo of me in my graduation cap, proudly labeled, Skylar Marie, Class of 2024. I wasn't expecting to make friends on my floor quickly. But then came Violet. She knocked on my door the second evening, holding a plate of slightly burnt brownies. "I can't bake," she said, "but I can read a box. And I need someone to eat these with me before I regret frosting them." Violet was everything I wasn't: pierced, loud, chaotic in the best way. She wore Doc Martens with glitter tights and called everyone darling, like she was a 1940s actress trapped in a Gen Z body. And just like that, we clicked. "Are you out?" she asked me bluntly on night 3, as we shared late-night fries in the dorm lounge. I blinked. Out as in? As in, does everyone here know you're trans, or is it a depends who's asking situation? I laughed. I guess, semi-out? It's on my terms. And usually not the first thing I lead with unless it feels safe. Violet nodded. Cool. I'm a pansexual cis girl who writes angry poetry and occasionally sets her oven on fire. We're gonna get along great. By mid-September, life had taken on a beautiful rhythm. Classes by day, writing sessions in the library by afternoon, calls with Amanda on weekends, and quiet evenings where Lee would come over, bringing instant noodles and unsolicited opinions on my creative nonfiction. "You're still protecting people too much," Lee said, one night as we lay tangled in my bed. "Stop editing your pain." "I'm not editing," I protested. "I'm just choosing how to tell the story." "You're allowed to be angry," they whispered. "You're allowed to name what hurt." I knew they were right. That week, I started a new essay. Title: The Version of Me You Never Asked For. Then came the incident in the library. It was a Tuesday. I'd just finished revising a piece about my childhood and went to print it from one of the shared computers. As I reached for the paper, a guy beside me looked up and did a double take. "You. Skylar, right?" I froze. He looked familiar. "Football player? Maybe? Definitely someone from high school." "Yeah," I said cautiously. He grinned. "Wow. I almost didn't recognize you. You look really different. But, like, good different." "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. Then, before I could walk away, he added, "So, you're, like, actually a girl now?" The air went still. It wasn't malicious. But it stung. I looked him in the eye. "I've always been a girl. Now people just see it." He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to deflect, but I didn't wait. I took my printout and walked away. Later that night, I sat down with Lee and Violet in our lounge. I recounted the moment, still shaking from the aftershock. "I hate that he made me feel like I owed him an explanation," I muttered. "You don't owe anyone anything," Violet said firmly. "Existing isn't a negotiation." Lee just pulled me into a hug. "You were brave. And clear. And you didn't shrink. That matters." After that, something shifted in me. The girl I saw in the mirror wasn't just surviving, she was starting to own the space she took up. I wrote the moment into a new piece for Reflections. Sometimes visibility feels like standing under a spotlight that you didn't turn on. But maybe, just maybe, it's time I held the light myself. The fall air had a sharpness to it, the kind that made you crave sweaters, hot drinks, and conversations that went deeper than the weather. October had arrived, and with it, the kind of days that made the world feel cinematic, amber light spilling through red leaves, the scent of something burning in the distance, like bonfires or old paper. It was the season for transformation. And strangely enough, I wasn't the one going through the biggest change.